There is a woman in Denver who makes more money than her father ever did. She has the corner office, the leather bag that cost more than most people's rent, and a LinkedIn headline that reads like a resume for royalty. And she is, financially speaking, quietly falling apart. Nobody would guess it. That is the whole point. Because the story we tell ourselves about women and money is almost always the wrong story. We picture the mistake as reckless spending, designer bags, lattes, a shopping addiction dressed up as retail therapy. It is a tidy little narrative, and it is mostly fiction, sold to us because it is easier to laugh at a woman buying shoes than to examine the quieter, more dangerous habits sitting underneath her bank statement. The real mistakes are rarely loud. They do not show up as a single bad decision. They show up as a pattern, repeated so consistently that it starts to look like personality instead of what it actually is, which is a financial leak with a very good disguise. So picture this instead. Not 5 years from now. Not some hypothetical future self. Right now, tonight, somewhere in this country, a woman is logging into her banking app before bed, the way people check their phones out of habit rather than need. She glances at the number, feels a small flicker of unease, closes the app, tells herself she will deal with it later. That moment, repeated thousands of times across thousands of women, is where wealth quietly goes to die. Most people think financial ruin looks like a crisis, a collapse, a dramatic scene. It almost never does. It looks like avoidance, wearing a very calm face. Here is the belief nearly every woman has been handed since childhood, usually without a single sentence of it ever being said out loud. Wealth begins with a bigger paycheck. Earn more, and the money problems solve themselves. It sounds reasonable. It is also, according to nearly every study on high-income households, spectacularly wrong. Because plenty of women earning six figures are one emergency away from panic, while women earning a fraction of that have quietly built portfolios that would make a hedge fund manager raise an eyebrow. The difference was never really about the income. It was about what happened to the money the moment it arrived. And that is where the story actually begins. Let's talk about a woman named Kelsey. She works in pharmaceutical sales in Nashville, and by every visible measure, she is winning. Great salary, great car, a closet that looks like a magazine spread. Kelsey is, on paper, the success story. Off paper, she has almost nothing saved, because Kelsey has spent the last decade doing something so common, it barely registers as a mistake anymore. She has been financing a lifestyle that matches her income instead of building wealth that outlasts it. This has a name. Behavioral economists call it lifestyle inflation, and it is sneaky precisely because it never feels like overspending. Every purchase feels earned. Every upgrade feels deserved. Kelsey did not wake up one day and decide to sabotage her future. She simply upgraded her apartment when she got promoted, upgraded her car when she got the next promotion, and somewhere in that steady climb, her expenses learned to sprint exactly as fast as her income. 2 steps forward, 2 steps back, forever. But here's the part that documentaries about money almost never mention because it requires actual psychology instead of a spreadsheet. Kelsey is not spending because she is careless. She is spending because visible success has become tangled up with her sense of safety. Somewhere along the way, looking successful started to feel like the same thing as being successful, and the two are not remotely the same. That confusion is not a personal failing unique to Kelsey. It is cultural, and it is aimed at women with a precision that is almost impressive if you step back and look at it clearly. Consider how differently society narrates a man's wealth versus a woman's wealth. A man in a modest car gets called disciplined. A woman in the same car gets asked if she is doing okay. A man skipping a vacation is being strategic. A woman skipping the same vacation is quietly interrogated by her friend group about whether something is wrong at home. The social pressure is not subtle once you notice it, and it pushes women toward visible spending as a form of proof. Proof that they are fine, proof that they are thriving, proof that they do not need anyone's concern. Spending, for a lot of women, is not really about the item. It is about the message the item sends before anyone even opens their mouth. If you are enjoying this exploration of the psychology behind money, identity, and the quiet decisions that shape a woman's financial future, go ahead and subscribe. Every episode digs into the hidden forces behind how women build, spend, and sometimes lose their financial independence, and there is a lot more of this coming. Now, back to Kelsey, because her story is only the entry point into something much bigger. The second mistake rarely gets discussed in polite company because it involves money and relationships, and combining those two topics tends to make everyone in the room suddenly very interested in their drink. It is the habit of financial merging without financial clarity. Women, far more often than men, quietly absorb their partner's financial decisions as though they were joint decisions, even when they were never actually discussed. Think about how often a woman's financial future gets rerouted by someone else's choices. A partner's business idea that eats the savings account. A partner's debt that somehow becomes shared debt without ever being formally shared. A partner's spending habits that get excused as personality quirks instead of confronted as financial risk. Not because the woman is naive, because she was taught, gently and repeatedly, that questioning the money in a relationship is somehow less romantic than trusting it blindly. There is a particular kind of silence that shows up in relationships around money, and it is almost always the woman who keeps it. She notices the numbers do not add up. She notices the retirement account has not grown in 3 years. She notices and she says nothing, because saying something feels like an accusation, and an accusation feels like a threat to the relationship itself. That silence is expensive. It compounds quietly the same way debt does, except instead of interest it costs years. Here is where the story takes a turn that most people do not expect. Because you would think the antidote to all of this is simple. Earn more, save more, ask more questions, problem solved. But something strange happens to the women who do build real wealth, who do escape the lifestyle trap, who do finally have the number in the bank account that was supposed to fix everything. They discover that financial freedom did not deliver what they thought it would. Meet a woman we will call Sandra, 44, based just outside Austin, who spent 19 years building a business from a spare bedroom into a company with actual employees and an actual balance sheet. She hit the number. The one she used to whisper to herself during the exhausting years, the number that was supposed to mean she had made it. And when she finally hit it, she called her sister crying, not from joy, but from something closer to grief. Because Sandra realized the wealth had not just changed her bank account. It had changed everything around her, and nobody had warned her about that part. Friendships got strange. Some friends started treating her differently, more careful, more distant, as though money had built a wall she never intended to construct. Family members started asking for loans disguised as gifts and gifts disguised as loans, and every conversation about money became a small negotiation about love. Her own sense of identity, built for 2 decades around being the scrappy woman who was going to make it, suddenly had nowhere to go, because she had already made it, and nobody prepares you for the strange emptiness that follows an achieved goal. This is the twist almost nobody talks about when they talk about women and wealth. The money was never really the hard part. The hard part was figuring out who you are once the money stops being the thing you are chasing. Financial independence, it turns out, does not automatically deliver personal freedom. Plenty of financially independent women are still trapped, just in quieter cages. Trapped by relationships they stay in out of habit rather than desire, because leaving now feels complicated when the money is finally settled. Trapped by identities built entirely around being the responsible one, the provider, the woman who has it together, unable to admit that having it together and feeling whole are not the same accomplishment. The deepest money mistake women make is not a spreadsheet mistake at all. It is believing that the number in the account will eventually answer questions that were never actually about money in the first place. Questions about worth. Questions about safety. Questions about whether they are allowed to want things simply because they want them, rather than because those things can be justified to someone else. Consider how differently women and men are taught to relate to ambition itself. A man chasing wealth is chasing wealth. A woman chasing wealth is so often quietly reframed by others and sometimes by herself as chasing security or independence or some softer, more acceptable version of the same drive, as though wanting money simply because money is powerful is somehow an unattractive thing for a woman to admit out loud. That reframing has consequences. It means women often undernegotiate salaries, not because they lack the skill, but because asking for what they are worth feels like an aggressive act rather than a reasonable one. It means women delay investing, sometimes for years, because the world of markets and portfolios has been quietly coded as a man's hobby, leaving plenty of financially brilliant women feeling like tourists in a country they actually have every right to own. And it means the most successful women often describe a strange kind of loneliness at the top because very few people around them understand what it costs to get there, and even fewer understand what it costs to stay. So, where does that leave the woman checking her banking app before bed, the one who started the story? It leaves her somewhere more hopeful than the pattern suggests, actually, because every single mistake described here shares one thing in common. They are not character flaws. They are learned behaviors, absorbed from a culture that has spent generations teaching women to treat money as either a threat, a proof point, or someone else's department. Learned behaviors can be unlearned. That is the quiet, unglamorous truth sitting underneath every dramatic wealth story you will ever watch. The women who eventually build real financial independence rarely do it through a single lucky break. They do it by noticing the pattern, calling it by its name, and making one different choice, then another, until the different choices become the new habit. The lifestyle inflation gets noticed and interrupted before it eats another promotion. The financial silence in the relationship gets broken, awkwardly, imperfectly, but broken. The identity gets slowly untangled from the bank balance so that the number can finally just be a number instead of a referendum on someone's worth as a human being. None of this is really a finance story if you look closely. It is a story about permission. Permission to want money without apologizing for wanting it. Permission to ask uncomfortable questions in a relationship before the silence becomes expensive. Permission to build wealth and still admit, honestly, that the wealth alone was never going to be the whole answer. The women who eventually get free, financially and otherwise, are not the ones who found some secret formula the rest of us missed. They are the ones who stopped waiting for the number to fix what was never actually about the number and started asking better questions instead. Not how much do I have, but what is it actually for? Not how does this look, but how does this feel once nobody else is watching? That is the real difference between the woman still checking her banking app with quiet dread and the woman who has finally made peace with hers. It was never just about the balance. It was about finally deciding that her own life, her own choices, and her own sense of enough belonged to her and to no one else.